Ambassador Velshara stood at the viewing port of the diplomatic station, watching the stars shimmer against the darkness of space. The Kethrion felt the familiar weight of the environmental suit pressing against their body. It was comforting, like a second skin that had been part of them since childhood. Every Kethrion wore these suits. They were more than protection. They were identity, dignity, and safety, all combined into one. The station coordinator, a spider-like alien named Thrix, approached with several data tablets floating beside him. Ambassador Velshara, your quarters are ready. The human representative will arrive tomorrow morning for your first official meeting. Velshara turned from the window. Through the transparent face shield of the suit, their large amber eyes studied the coordinator carefully. Tell me about this human. Commander Marcus Chen, what should I expect? Thrix's multiple limbs gestured, and what Velshara had learned was uncertainty. Humans are unpredictable, Ambassador. They are new to the galactic community. Only 5 years since first contact, but they are intelligent, adaptable, and surprisingly capable. Commander Chen has an excellent record. He led this successful negotiation with the Yillari Trade Federation last year. What are their customs? Their protocols? Velshara asked. In Kethrin culture, knowing the proper forms of address and behavior was essential. A wrong gesture could end negotiations before they began. The briefing materials cover the basics, Thrix said, sending one of the data tablets floating toward Velshara. But I must warn you, Ambassador. Human behavior does not always follow predictable patterns. They value something they call flexibility and thinking outside the box. Sometimes they ignore their own protocols. Velshara caught the tablet and began scrolling through the information. Humans wore different coverings called clothing that they changed regularly. They consumed food by putting it directly into their mouths. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and no natural armor. They seemed fragile, yet they had developed faster than light travel in a remarkably short time. They seem contradictory, Velshara observed. That is an accurate assessment, Thrix agreed. But they are also sincere in their desire for peaceful relations. The Galactic Council believes humanity could become an important ally. Velshara nodded. Then I will do my duty. The Kethrian Empire values new partnerships. The next morning, Velshara woke early in their quarters. The suit's internal systems had already adjusted the temperature, filtered the air, and provided the gentle sonic cleaning that removed any accumulated debris. Velshara never took the suit off. No Kethrian did, except in the most private medical facilities, and even then, only when absolutely necessary. The day proceeded with standard diplomatic preparations. Velshara reviewed the meeting agenda. Studied human facial expressions, they apparently moved their face parts to communicate emotions, and practiced the human gesture of handshaking. With a training simulation, everything was ready for tomorrow's formal meeting. Velshara felt confident. Then, the emergency alert chimed on Velshara's communication. Panel Ambassador Velshara, came the voice of the station's central. AI. Priority message from the Kethrion High Command. Urgent matter requiring immediate consultation with the human representative. Velshara accessed the encrypted message. Their eyes widened. A Kethrian mining vessel had accidentally entered a region of space that humans had claimed for scientific research. The human ship in that sector had issued a warning, and the Kethrian captain, following standard defensive protocols, had raised shields and powered weapons. The situation was tense. If shots were fired, it could destroy the carefully planned diplomatic mission before it even began.
Aye.
Connect me to Commander Chen immediately, Velshara commanded. Commander Chen's communication device is not responding, the AI replied. However, he is currently in his assigned quarters. Station regulations allow diplomatic personnel to visit each other's quarters when matters are urgent. In Kethrian culture, arriving unannounced at someone's quarters was actually a sign of great trust. It showed that you believed the other person was always ready, always prepared, and that your relationship was strong enough to bypass formal protocols. During critical situations, Kethrian ambassadors often went directly to their counterparts to show the seriousness of the matter. Grant me access to Commander Chen's quarters, Velshara said. Access granted, the AI responded. Velshara moved quickly through the station's corridors. The synthetic gravity pulled at the heavy suit, but Velshara was used to it. Other aliens moved aside as the Kethrian passed. The suit made Velshara imposing, nearly 7 feet tall, with the armored plating adding bulk to an already large frame. The door to Chun's quarters approached rapidly. Velshara's mind raced through possible conversation openings. They needed to prevent this situation from escalating. Perhaps if both sides agreed to immediate withdrawal, with a promise to establish clear boundaries within the week. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Velshara stepped through, already beginning to speak. Commander Chen, we have an urgent situation that requires the words died. Commander Marcus Chen stood in the center of the room. Water dripped from his dark hair, rolling down his bare shoulders, his chest, his arms. He wore nothing. No clothing. No protective covering. No armor. Nothing. He was completely, utterly unclothed. Velshara froze. Every instinct screamed contradictory messages. In Kethrian culture, this could only mean 2 things. Either Chen was declaring war, showing he had no need for defensive armor because he was so confident in his ability to destroy Velshara, or it was an extreme insult, implying that Velshara was so far beneath Chen's concern that Chen did not even need to present himself properly. Chen's eyes went wide. His mouth opened. Ambassador. I wait. I didn't. Velshara took an involuntary step backward. The human's skin was visible. Velshara could see the outline of bones, the movement of muscles, the vulnerability of flesh with nothing protecting it. It was disturbing. It was shocking. It was completely outside anything Velshara had prepared for. I apologize. Chen grabbed a white piece of cloth from a nearby rack and wrapped it around his waist. I was in the shower. I didn't know you were coming. The door shouldn't have ... double quotes, shower. Velshara's translator struggled with the term. Something about water and cleaning. But Kethrians cleaned with sonic vibrations inside their suits. Why would anyone remove their protective covering to clean themselves? I must go, Velshara managed to say. The translator made the words sound steady, but inside, Velshara's mind was chaos. Ambassador, please let me explain, Chen started forward, still clutching the cloth around himself. But Velshara was already turning, already leaving. The door slid shut behind them. In the corridor, Velshara leaned against the wall. Other station inhabitants passed by, but Velshara barely noticed them. What had just happened? Had the human deliberately insulted Kethrian dignity? Was this some kind of power play? Or had Velshara just committed a terrible error by entering without announcing themselves first? The urgent message about the mining vessels seemed distant now. Velshara had come to prevent an interstellar incident. Instead, Velshara might have just created one. Hashai walked into his room. The human was completely unclothed. Hashash. Part 2. The misunderstanding veils returned to their quarters with rapid steps. The door sealed behind them, and for the first time since arriving at the station, the Kethrian ambassador felt truly grateful for the privacy. What had just happened made no sense. Commander Chen had been completely exposed, vulnerable, unprotected, and he had seemed embarrassed rather than aggressive. That single fact disturbed Velshara more than anything else. If Chen had been hostile, Velshara would have understood. If it had been an insult, there were diplomatic protocols to follow. But Chen had seemed genuinely surprised and apologetic, which meant Velshara had fundamentally misunderstood something about human culture. Computer, Velshara said to the quarters AI system. Access all available information about human clothing, customs, and daily routines. The screens around the room lit up with information. Velshara began reading, and with each paragraph, the ambassador's confusion grew deeper. Humans removed their clothing regularly. They did it every day, sometimes multiple times per day. They removed clothing to sleep. They removed clothing to bathe. They removed clothing for medical examinations. Some humans even removed clothing for recreational activities they called swimming and sunbathing. This cannot be correct. Velshara muttered. Computer, verify this information. Cross-reference with multiple sources. Information verified, the AI responded. Human clothing is removable and is changed frequently. Humans spend approximately 30% of their private time without clothing. 30%. Velshara tried to imagine spending nearly a third of life without the suit. The idea was terrifying. Without the suit, a Kethrian was exposed to temperature changes, air contaminants, physical dangers. Without the suit, other beings could see every detail of your body, every imperfection, every vulnerable spot. Velshara read further. Humans actually washed their bodies with water. They stood under streams of water and used chemical substances called soap to clean their skin. The process Chen had called a shower was a normal, daily activity that every human performed. The ambassador sat down heavily in the Kethrian-style chair. Chen had not been declaring war. He had not been insulting Velshara. He had simply been performing a routine hygiene task that every human did regularly, and Velshara had walked in on him without warning. "Oh no," Velshara said softly. In human culture, entering someone's private space without permission was considered rude. Velshara had read that in the briefing materials, but had not fully understood the implications. Humans had something called privacy that they valued highly, especially in their personal quarters. Velshara had violated Shan's privacy during an intimate moment. The communication panel chimed. Velshara hesitated, then accepted the call. Commander Chen's face appeared on the screen. He had clothes on now, a formal military uniform in dark blue. His face showed concern. Ambassador Velshara Chen began carefully. "I want to apologize for what happened. I should have locked my door, or at least set the communication system to alert me if anyone approached." No, Velshara interrupted. "I am the one who must apologize, Commander. I entered your quarters without requesting permission first. In Kethrian culture, arriving unannounced is a sign of trust. But I have learned that humans value privacy. I did not respect that." Chen's face relaxed slightly. "I appreciate that, Ambassador. But I also understand there was an urgent matter you needed to discuss. The AI informed me about the mining vessel situation." Velshara had almost forgotten about the original crisis. "Yes. We need to prevent escalation between our ships. I've already sent orders to the human research vessel to stand down and withdraw to a safe distance," Chen said. "I recommend your mining vessel do the same. Then we can establish proper boundaries through official channels." "I will contact my superiors immediately," Velshara agreed. There was a pause. Chen seemed to want to say something more. Ambassador Chen finally said, "May I ask you something? What did you think when you saw me without clothing?" Velshara considered how to answer honestly. In Kethrian culture, being unclothed before a stranger means either you are preparing for combat or you are showing extreme disrespect. "I was confused because your behavior suggested neither. You seemed ... embarrassed." Chen nodded slowly. In most human cultures, being seen unclothed by someone you don't know well is embarrassing. We wear clothes for protection from weather, yes, but also for modesty. Being unclothed is considered private and personal. "But you remove your clothing regularly," Velshara said. "The computer files show humans spend much time unclothed in private." "That's true," Chen acknowledged. "Humans need to be comfortable. Clothing can be restrictive. When we're alone or with people we trust completely, many of us prefer to be unclothed or wear minimal clothing. It's natural for us. Natural." The word echoed in Velshara's mind. For Kethrians, the suit was natural. They were born and immediately placed in infant-sized suits. They grew up in suits. They lived their entire lives in suits. The idea of existing without that protection seemed completely unnatural. "Do you never fear being vulnerable?" Velshara asked. Chen smiled. "Of course we do. Humans are fragile compared to many species. We don't have thick skin or natural armor. But we've learned that being vulnerable sometimes is necessary. To truly be comfortable, to really rest, we need to remove our barriers." Does that make sense? Velshara thought about this. Kethrians never truly rested. They slept in their suits. They ate in their suits using feeding tubes that connected to the mouthpiece. They lived in constant readiness, constant protection. I am beginning to understand, Velshara said slowly. But it still seems dangerous. Can be, Chen admitted. That's why we only do it in safe places. Our quarters, our homes, private facilities. We trust our environment enough to lower our defenses. Trust. There was that word again. Velshara had thought entering Chen's quarters unannounced showed trust. But perhaps true trust was what Chen described. Trusting your environment enough to be completely vulnerable? Commander Chen, Velshara said. I would like to continue our discussion. Not about the mining vessels, but about our cultures. I believe I have much to learn about humanity. Chen's smile widened. I'd like that, Ambassador. And please call me Marcus. I think we've already passed the point of formal titles only. Velshara felt something unusual. If Cathrians could smile through their suits, Velshara might have done so. Very well, Marcus. You may call me Velshara. After the communication ended, Velshara sat in thought for a long time. The mining vessel crisis would be resolved soon, but something more important had begun. Velshara had glimpsed something fundamental about humans. They were strong enough to be vulnerable. They trusted enough to remove their armor. For a species that lived in constant protection, this was a revolutionary idea, and Velshara wanted to understand it better. The Kethrian ambassador stood and looked at their reflection in the polished metal of the wall. The environmental suit gleamed, strong and impenetrable. For the first time in their life, Velshara wondered what it would feel like to take it off. I walked into his room. The human was completely unclothed. Part 3. The Cultural Exchange 3, days after the incident. Velshara sat across from Marcus Chen in the station's diplomatic conference room. Between them, a holographic display showed the agreed boundaries for mining and research activities. The crisis had been resolved peacefully. Both vessels had withdrawn, and official protocols had been established to prevent future conflicts. But Velshara had requested this additional meeting for another reason entirely. Marcus, Velshara began, I have been studying human customs since our uncomfortable first encounter, but reading data files does not give me true understanding. I would like to ask you questions directly, if you do not mind. Marcus leaned back in his chair. A posture that Velshara had learned indicated relaxation rather than disrespect. Of course. Ask anything. Why do humans remove their clothing? Velshara asked. I understand the practical reasons for bathing and sleeping, but the files mention that some humans prefer to be unclothed, even when it is not necessary. Why would anyone choose to be vulnerable? Marcus considered the question carefully. It's not really about choosing vulnerability. It's about choosing comfort and freedom. Clothing can be restrictive. It rubs against skin, traps heat, limits movement. When we're in safe private spaces, removing clothing lets our bodies breathe and move naturally. It's liberating, Velshara repeated. You feel trapped by your clothing? Sometimes yes, Marcus said. Especially formal clothing like military uniforms. They're necessary for professional settings, but after a long day, most humans want to change into comfortable clothes or remove them entirely. It's like, do you ever wish you could take off your environmental suit? The question struck Velshara deeply. No, never. The suit is part of who we are. Removing it would be like removing part of myself. But have you ever tried? Marcus asked gently. Velshara's voice became quiet. Cathrians do not remove their suits except in medical emergencies. Even then, it is done only in sealed, sterile environments with medical professionals present. It is not something we do casually. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. So you've never felt air directly on your skin? Never felt water running over your body? Never felt the warmth of sunlight without barriers? No, Velshara admitted. The suit provides perfect temperature control. It filters air to ideal composition. It protects from all environmental factors. Why would we need to feel these things directly? Because feeling things directly is part of being alive, Marcus said. His voice held no judgment, only gentle explanation. Humans need sensory input. We need to touch, to feel, to experience the world around us. Without that connection, we feel isolated and disconnected. Velshara thought about this. Cathrians did feel isolated sometimes, but they had always assumed it was simply part of life. Everyone wore suits. Everyone maintained proper distance. Physical contact was rare and highly formalized. You mentioned trust earlier, Velshara said. You said humans remove clothing in places where they feel safe. Does this mean clothing is not just physical protection, but emotional protection as well? Marcus's eyes widened slightly. That's actually very insightful, Velshara. Yes, clothing can be emotional armor too. We dress formally for business to project authority. We dress casually with friends to show we're relaxed. And we remove clothing in intimate settings to show ultimate trust. Being physically vulnerable with someone requires emotional trust. So when I walked into your quarters and saw you unclothed, Velshara said slowly, I was seeing you at your most trusting and vulnerable moment. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. That's why I was embarrassed. Not because being unclothed is shameful, but because you saw me in a moment meant to be private. It was like you saw past all my defenses at once. Velshara felt a new understanding forming. And yet, you did not become angry or hostile. You simply wanted to explain and move forward, because it was clearly an accident, Marcus said. And because I understood it was a cultural misunderstanding, anger would not have solved anything. The Kethrian ambassador sat quietly for a moment. Marcus, I must tell you something. When I saw you unclothed, my first instinct was fear. In our culture, dropping all defenses means you are either attacking or showing contempt. But you were doing neither. You were simply ... existing. Being comfortable in your own space. This concept is completely foreign to my people. Marcus leaned forward. What would happen if a Kethrian tried to remove their suit in private? It would be considered a sign of mental instability, Velshara said. Other Kethrians would be concerned. Medical professionals would be contacted. The individual would likely be treated for psychological problems. That's sad, Marcus said softly. To never have the option to just be yourself without barriers. We believe the suits allow us to be ourselves, Velshara countered. They protect us, define us, connect us to our history and culture. I'm not saying the suits are wrong, Marcus clarified. Every culture has different values. But I wonder if your people might be missing something important. Connection. Not just intellectual connection, but physical, sensory connection to the world and to each other. Velshara's mind raced with implications. You think our suits prevent us from truly connecting? I think they might limit certain types of connection, Marcus said carefully. Humans communicate through touch, a handshake, a hug, a pat on the back. These physical contacts convey trust, affection, support. Can Kethrians do that through their suits? No, Velshara admitted. Physical contact between Kethrians is minimal and formal. We touch suits, not people. Then you never really touch each other, Marcus said. You never feel the warmth of another person's hand. You never experience the comfort of physical closeness. The words settled over Velshara like a weight. All this time, Kethrians had believed their suits protected them from danger. But perhaps the suits also protected them from something valuable. From connection? From intimacy? From the simple, direct experience of another living being? I need to think about this, Velshara said finally. Marcus smiled. Take all the time you need. These are big ideas. As Velshara walked back to their quarters, the ambassador's mind churned with questions. The suit that had always felt like safety now felt like a cage. Not a cruel cage, but a limiting one. A cage built from fear and tradition. Velshara reached the quarters and stood before the mirror again. The suit gleamed, perfect and impenetrable. Inside it, Velshara was safe, protected, isolated. The Kethrian ambassador reached up and touched the helmet seals. They had never been opened outside of medical facilities. Opening them here, alone, would violate every social norm Velshara had ever known. But Marcus's words echoed in Velshara's mind. Being physically vulnerable requires emotional trust. Could Velshara trust? Could a Kethrian learn to be vulnerable, even in private? Velshara's fingers trembled over the seals but did not open them. Not yet. The fear was too great. The lifetime of conditioning too strong. But for the first time, Velshara wanted to try, and that desire itself was revolutionary. I walked into his room. The human was completely unclothed. Part 4. The experiment in Trust 2 weeks passed. Velshara and Marcus met regularly, sometimes for official diplomatic work, but more often for what Marcus called cultural exchange sessions. Velshara observed human crew members throughout the station. Watching how they interacted, the differences were striking. Humans touched each other constantly. A hand on a shoulder to offer comfort. A quick embrace between friends. Even strangers shook hands upon meeting. All this physical contact happened naturally, without fear or hesitation. Velshara also noticed how human clothing changed throughout the day. Formal uniforms during duty hours. Casual, comfortable clothes during leisure time. Some humans wore very little clothing in the recreation areas, especially near the swimming facility Marcus had told Velshara about. "You're observing us?" Marcus said one day, finding Velshara watching crew members in the station's common area.
Nice.
Velshara admitted, "I am trying to understand how your people can be so comfortable with vulnerability. Every day, you remove your protective coverings. Every day, you expose yourself to potential harm. Yet you seem happy, not fearful." "That's because we trust our environment and each other," Marcus explained. "The station is safe. The people here are colleagues and friends. Why would we walk around in full armor when there's no threat?" "Because threats can appear suddenly," Velshara said. "It is better to always be prepared." "Is it, though?" Marcus challenged gently. "Always being prepared means always being tense. Always ready for danger? That's exhausting. Humans need to rest, to relax completely. We can't do that while maintaining constant vigilance." Before Velshara could respond, an alarm blared throughout the station. The light shifted to emergency red. Marcus's communication device activated immediately. "All personnel, this is Station Command. We have received a distress call from New Harmony Colony. Natural disaster in progress. Seismic activity has caused multiple structural collapses. Casualties reported. All available ships are to respond immediately for rescue operations." Marcus looked at Velshara. "New Harmony is a joint colony. Both humans and Kethrians live there. Then we must both go," Velshara said. Within an hour, they were aboard a human rapid response vessel. The ship also carried a Kethrian rescue team that had been training on the station. As they approached New Harmony, the scope of the disaster became clear. An unexpected earthquake had devastated the colony's main settlement. Buildings had collapsed. Power was out. People were trapped in the rubble. The rescue teams deployed quickly. Human teams rushed toward the collapsed structures with determination. The Kethrian teams followed, moving more cautiously in their heavy environmental suits. Velshara worked alongside Marcus, coordinating the rescue efforts. They received reports constantly. 3 humans pulled alive from a collapsed residential building. 2 Kethrians rescued from a damaged research facility. The work continued for hours. Then came the urgent call. "We have located 5 Kethrians trapped in the lower levels of the administrative building. The structure is unstable. Large debris blocks the main access points." Marcus studied the structural scans. "The access corridor is too narrow for environmental suits. The Kethrian rescue team can't reach them, and they cannot be rescued," one of the Kethrian rescuers said. "The suits cannot be removed in such conditions." "But humans can fit," Marcus said. He looked at his team. "Who's willing to go?" 3 human rescuers stepped forward immediately. They began stripping off their protective outer gear, removing everything that might catch or slow them down in the narrow passages. They kept only basic clothing, helmets with lights, and emergency breathing equipment. Velshara watched in amazement as the humans prepared to crawl through unstable, dangerous rubble with minimal protection. They were making themselves vulnerable intentionally, accepting enormous personal risk. "Marcus, your people could be injured or killed," Velshara said. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But 5 Kethrians will definitely die if we do nothing." The choice is clear. The human rescuers entered the collapsed building. Velshara monitored their progress through their helmet cameras. The passages were tight, claustrophobic. Sharp edges of broken metal and concrete scraped against the humans' exposed skin. They squeezed through spaces barely wide enough for their bodies. "I have visual on the trapped Kethrians," the lead rescuer reported. "They're alive, but their suits are damaged. Air supply is critical. Can you reach them?" Marcus asked. "Barely. This is going to be tight." Velshara watched as the human rescuers worked in the cramped, dangerous space. They moved with efficiency born from training, but also with something else: determination, compassion. They were risking their fragile, unprotected bodies to save people from another species. One of the trapped Kethrians, a young engineer named Keshrel, watched through their damaged helmet as the human approached. Keshrel had never seen a human this close before. The rescuer's face was visible through the helmet's clear visor. His arms were bare, covered in scratches and dirt. He smiled at Keshrel. "Hey there," the human said. "I'm Lieutenant Davies. We're going to get you out of here." Keshrel watched in fascination as Lieutenant Davies squeezed through an impossibly narrow gap that would have been completely impassable for a suited Kethrian. The human's flexibility, his willingness to contort his body and accept the scrapes and bruises, allowed him to reach places that armored beings could not. "How, double quotes," Keshrel started to ask. "How am I fitting through here?" Davies finished with a grin. "Benefits of not wearing heavy armor. Now, let's check your suit's integrity and get you some fresh air." Over the next hour, the human rescue team carefully extracted all 5 trapped Kethrians. When they finally emerged from the collapsed building, the humans were covered in dust, bleeding from numerous cuts and scrapes. Exhausted but triumphant, Keshrel approached Velshara. The young Kethrian's suit was dirty and damaged, but they were alive. "Ambassador, I must speak with you." "Of course," Velshara said. "I watched the humans risk their lives for us," Keshrel said quietly. "They wore almost nothing. They bled. They could have died. But they came anyway. They made themselves vulnerable to save strangers. I have never seen such courage." Velshara looked at the human rescue team. Medics were treating their injuries. Despite their wounds and exhaustion, they were smiling, celebrating the successful rescue. "Yes," Velshara said softly. "I am beginning to understand something about humanity. Their vulnerability is not weakness. It is a different kind of strength." Marcus approached, a bandage on his forehead. "All 5 Kethrians are stable. Your people are tough. Those suits really protected them from the worst of the collapse." "And your people are brave," Velshara replied. "You removed your protection to reach them. You accepted injury to save others." Marcus shrugged. "That's what we do. When someone needs help, you help them. Simple as that." But it was not simple. Velshara realized that it required something Kethrians had lost, or perhaps never had: the ability to accept vulnerability for a greater purpose. The willingness to risk personal safety for the benefit of others. Keshrel spoke up. "Ambassador, if humans can teach us to be this brave, should we not learn from them?" The question hung in the air. Velshara looked at the young Kethrian, then at Marcus, then at the other humans who had risked so much. "Yes," Velshara said finally. "I believe we should." I walked into his room. The human was completely unclothed. Part 5. Bridging to Worlds. The rescue operation at New Harmony Colony became a turning point that no one had anticipated. News of human rescuers risking their unprotected bodies to save trapped Kethrians spread rapidly through both civilizations. For humans, it was simply another example of their people helping others in need. For Kethrians, it was revolutionary. Velshara returned to the diplomatic station with a new purpose. The ambassador composed a detailed report for the Kethrian High Command, describing not just the rescue operation, but everything learned about humanity over the past weeks. The report was controversial. Ambassador Velshara suggests that our environmental suits, the foundation of our civilization, may be limiting our development. High Commander Thelver said during the video conference, This is a radical position. I am not suggesting we abandon our suits entirely, Velshara explained carefully. But I believe we should consider that humanity's comfort with vulnerability gives them advantages we lack. They form deeper bonds with each other. They adapt more quickly to new situations. They are willing to take personal risks for the collective good. They are also fragile and short-lived, another commander argued. Their average lifespan is barely half of ours, yet they accomplish remarkable things in that shorter time, Velshara countered. Perhaps because they know their time is limited, they live more fully. They experience more directly. They connect more deeply. The debate continued for hours. Traditional Cathrians saw Velshara's suggestions as dangerous and unnecessary. But younger Cathrians, especially those who had witnessed or heard about the rescue operation, were curious. Keshral, the young engineer who had been rescued, sent a message to Velshara. I cannot stop thinking about what I saw. The human who saved me, Lieutenant Davies, he smiled at me while bleeding and exhausted. He seemed more alive in that moment of pain and effort than I have felt in my entire safe, comfortable life. Is that wrong to think? No, Velshara replied. I have been thinking similar thoughts. Meanwhile, Marcus received his own new assignment. The human government, impressed by the successful cooperation during the crisis, asked him to establish a permanent embassy on the Kethrian homeworld. It would be the first human presence on Kethris' prime. The heavily industrialized planet where billions of Kethrians lived in perfectly climate-controlled cities. I want you to come with me, Marcus told Velshara. Be the Kethrian liaison for the embassy. Help my people understand your world and help your people understand mine. Velshara agreed immediately. The preparations took several weeks. During that time, Velshara noticed something interesting happening among the younger Kethrians on the station. They began to gather in small private groups. They asked the station's medical staff about suit removal procedures. They whispered about conducting experiments in vulnerability. One evening, Keshral came to Velshara's quarters with a confession. Ambassador, I must tell you something. Last night, in my quarters, with all the doors locked and privacy settings at maximum, I opened my helmet seals. Velshara stared at the young engineer. You removed your helmet? Voluntarily? Only for a few minutes, Keshral said quickly. I was terrified. But I wanted to know what it felt like. To breathe unfiltered air? To feel temperature directly on my face. And what did you feel? Velshara asked quietly. Keshral's voice became soft, almost wondering. I felt alive, Ambassador. Truly alive. The air was cooler than my suit's climate control. I could smell things I had never noticed before. When I moved my face, I felt the air moving across my skin. It was strange and frightening and wonderful all at once. Did you tell anyone else? Velshara asked. There are others doing the same thing, Keshral admitted. We do not talk about it openly, but we know. We are learning what humans already understand. That sometimes being vulnerable is necessary to truly live. Velshara felt a strange emotion. Pride, perhaps. Or hope. The young generation was already changing. Already questioning traditions that had stood for thousands of years. The day came for Marcus and Velshara to travel to Kethris Prime. The human embassy building had been prepared. A structure designed to accommodate both human and Kethrian needs. It had areas with human-friendly atmosphere and temperature, and areas with Kethrian environmental standards. The opening ceremony was attended by dignitaries from both civilizations. Velshara stood beside Marcus on the stage, watching as representatives from two very different species came together. This embassy represents more than diplomatic relations, Marcus said in his speech. It represents the possibility of true understanding between species. We come from different worlds, with different customs and different bodies, but we share the same galaxy, and we are stronger together than apart. After the public ceremony, Marcus and Velshara had a private moment in the embassy's observation room. Through the windows, they could see the gleaming towers of the Kethrian capital city. Marcus, Velshara said, I want to show you something, but you must promise not to react strongly. Okay, Marcus agreed, looking curious. Velshara's hands moved to the helmet seals. The ambassador had practiced this movement many times in private over the past weeks, but had never gone through with it. Fear had always won. But now, standing with Marcus, Velshara felt ready. The seals released with a soft hiss. Slowly, carefully, Velshara lifted the helmet's face shield, exposing their face to the air for the first time in Marcus's presence. For the first time in the presence of any non-Kithrian, the air felt strange on Velshara's face. Cool, moving, alive. Velshara's large amber eyes blinked in the unfiltered light. The Kithrian's blue-tinted skin, usually only visible through the helmet's transparent shield, is now fully exposed. Marcus smiled gently. He did not gasp or react with shock. He simply accepted this moment for what it was. A gesture of profound trust. "Thank you for trusting me," Marcus said softly. "Thank you for teaching me that I could," Velshara replied. They stood together in silence for a moment. Then Velshara lowered the face shield again, resealing the helmet. It was only a small step, only a brief moment of vulnerability. But it was a beginning. Over the following months, Velshara and Marcus worked to build bridges between their peoples. The embassy became a place where humans and Kethrians could learn from each other. Humans discovered the value of Kethrian engineering and long-term thinking. Kethrians discovered human adaptability and emotional depth. And quietly, in private spaces, more and more young Kethrians began experimenting with moments of vulnerability. They removed their helmets in their quarters. Some even removed entire suit sections, experiencing direct touch for the first time in their lives. The High Command noticed these changes and was concerned. But they also could not deny that the young Kethrians who practiced these human behaviors seemed happier, more creative, and more connected to each other. A full year after the incident that started everything, Velshara and Marcus sat together in the embassy's garden, a space designed to accommodate both species. Marcus wore casual human clothing. Velshara wore the environmental suit, but the helmet's face shield was raised. It had become normal for them now, this middle ground between full protection and complete vulnerability. "Do you remember when you walked into my quarters?" Marcus asked, with a slight smile. "Of course," Velshara said. "I was so shocked. So confused. I thought it was a disaster." "It was the best disaster that could have happened," Marcus said, "because it forced us both to confront our assumptions. You learned that vulnerability can be strength. I learned that protection can be culture and identity, not just fear." "We have both changed," Velshara agreed. A young Kethrian approached them. It was Keshral, now working as an engineer at the embassy. "Ambassador Velshara, I have news. The High Command has approved a research program. They are going to study human psychology and social structures. They want to understand how humanity's approach to vulnerability affects their civilization." Velshara felt that emotion again. Hope. That is excellent news. After Keshral left, Marcus looked at Velshara. "You did this, you know. You started a revolution," Velshara said. "You started it by being yourself, by being unclothed in your own quarters, living naturally as humans do. I just walked in and saw something I did not understand. Everything that followed came from trying to understand." "Then maybe understanding is the real revolution," Marcus suggested. Velshara considered this. Yes, perhaps the greatest barrier between species is not technology or distance or even biology. It is the assumption that others must think and feel as we do. When I saw you without clothing, I assumed you were threatening me, but you were simply being human. Once I understood that, everything else became possible." They sat together, watching the alien sunset paint colors across the sky of Kethris's prime, two beings from different worlds. Learning to exist in the space between their differences, it had all started with a simple accident. A door opening at the wrong moment. A cultural misunderstanding. But from that awkward beginning, something important had grown. Not just an alliance between governments, but a real connection between people, and in the private quarters throughout the embassy. In locked rooms across Kethris's prime, young Kethrians continued their quiet revolution. Learning to be vulnerable, learning to trust, learning that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is lower your defenses and simply feel the air on your face. The universe was changing, one opened helmet at a time,